And after the killing of 42 people in Kasuan Daji community in Niger State on the 3rd of January this month, reports indicate that bandits are still wreaking havoc across the northern part of Borgu Emirate, unchecked. Now, the Bishop of Kontagora, Bolos Yohana, told Arise News that the gunmen had raided at least 6 communities in northern Niger and Kebbi states before they struck Kasuan Daji. Well, according to him, school children from St. Mary's private school, Papri, who had regained their freedom after their abduction, have been traumatized by the present threat. It says the children and their families have been seeking refuge in the bush following reports of an imminent attack.
This group of bandits has been roaming freely across the northern part of Borgu local government area in Niger State and the southern part of Shanga local government area in Kebbi State without being challenged by security forces. As a result, the Papri school children who were recently released from captivity have been further traumatized as they are forced to hide in the bush with their families. There is an immediate need for a large and well-equipped military task force in the area capable of and empowered to pursue, engage, and eliminate the bandits whenever they come out of the game reserve again for further attacks.
Joining us now is Major General Anthony Atolagbe, retired, former Field Commander, Joint Task Force, Operation Safe Haven. He's also a consultant to the regional bloc ECOWAS as well as the African Union. Current or once consultant?
Current.
Current. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here and Happy New Year. Great to see you.
Thank you. Same to you.
We're seeing all of this security reports across the country. On one hand, we are seeing successes by our troops and police force. On the other hand, we are seeing communities that are fleeing their homes for fear of terrorists. In particular, Bello Turji in the instance of Sokoto State. But let me ask you, what do you make of that instance in Sokoto? Because it's very troubling to hear.
Okay, that is the killings.
Yes, the killings
and the fact that people are running away.
Leaving their homes.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, what I would just say is that, well, Happy New Year to the listeners at home. Yeah. I know that, just like you have said, a lot of things are being done right now to make sure that people are safe, actually. And it's not just something that the military is echoing by themselves. The press can have been going around to actually verify some of these. I think what the military still needs to do is to see how we can expand more into some of these areas. And I think there are supposed to be some instruments to make sure that the public is well informed that the military is, the security agencies are not too far from them, rather than for them to start running away or escaping, because it is when you feel maybe help may not come at all that you resort to that kind of. I just let's just not despair, and let's be sure that let's hope that the military and the police are doing something tangible to make sure that the place is recaptured, reoccupied, and the lives are secured.
I wonder what type of tangible actions that the security forces can take to give these communities a sense of safety, because I doubt very much if they'll be afraid of fleeing if they actually felt the presence of security forces in their domains against the backdrop of the proliferation of small arms, small and light weapons in the region, West Africa, Sahel region, that seems to be giving oxygen to the activities of terrorists and bandits in the region. How do we begin to track these weapons? Because Nigeria, we're told, has about 70% in some instances, depends on the figures you're looking at, of the small and light weapons proliferation in the West Africa sub-region?
Okay, let me just take it from the top. There are legal instruments and frameworks under the UN that provide guidelines to countries and continents around the world on how to combat proliferation of arms and light weapons. There are programs of action which talks to how to control manufacturing and even the movement of weapons. We also have under the AU what they call the Bamako Declaration, which was in 2000. We also have I think ECOWAS actually is the one that has put something very cogent in place and which transcended into telling all the countries within West Africa to provide a national action plan. And this national action plan has been keyed into by the Nigerian government. So we now have a national coordination center for small arms and light weapons prohibition. Under the instruments that are provided, it has to do with control of manufacturing. We talk about weapons, movement also, and then we also talk about other areas that has to do with stockpiling, especially when we have so many sources of gathering all these weapons to prevent them from being trafficked around the country or perhaps in our environment. We also have other areas of cooperation like training. We're supposed to be, our own agencies are supposed to be doing training with other agencies of other countries. And then they're supposed to be sharing information. And then we have data compilation also. So these are some of the areas which the National Center here, they call it the National Center, has already keyed into. Under the ECOWAS, there's what they call the ECOWAS mechanism. The ECOWAS mechanism talks about conflict prevention, management, resolution, peacekeeping. So there are 3 articles under the ECOWAS Convention, which is articles number 3, 50, and 51, okay, which speaks to all these areas that I've mentioned in the area of control, in the area of stopping illegal trafficking of weapons within the region.
Okay. Despite all of these measures in place, Nigerians keep hearing of small weapons, light weapons, proliferation, and of course, the issue of the borders is usually highlighted as a major challenge. But, I mean, in your operational capacity and your vantage point, how really do they get into this country?
Okay.
And who are the people who have the small weapons and light weapons in this country? Is it just the bandits and the terrorists? And why has it been so difficult to stop this proliferation, which is fueling insecurity in Nigeria? Because those weapons are not cheap, or are they?
So let's recall that when the current Minister of Defense was the Chief of Defense Staff, he had suggested that perhaps we should make a wall around the 4,000 and something kilometers of land border that we have. And then when you look at that, we also have close to 800 and perhaps 70 something kilometers, not using nautical miles now, for the coastal line, the coastline of Nigeria. So when you put together, you are talking about close to 6,000 kilometers of both land and maritime. So it's a tedious job to do. Across the 400 and something kilometers I'm talking about, we are talking about close to more than 1,000 entry points, but only perhaps about 100 of these entry points are being manned by our security people. So we now see a situation where control is going to be very difficult. A lot of people sneak in, use waterways, because if you just deploy along the coastal area, perhaps at the major ports, where you have maybe the scanners will be used to check. In fact, despite the fact that containers still come through these ports, but you have seen 1 or 2 occasions where a transporter trailer is arrested, accosted, and then made to discharge, only to find out that there are weapons inside the truck or the container. So you ask yourself, how did they manage to pass through the scanners and all the other areas, all the other deployments?
So there's complicity?
Surely, there should be, because I accept they use any other approach through the waterways. There couldn't be any other way that such a container of that size will pass through without somebody being able to actually use either the scanners that are available at the ports to check whether these containers actually. So we know that there's some complicities around the movement of some of these equipment.
So how do you ensure the effectiveness? So whatever measures that are put in place. Earlier, I mean, you said it was a tasking job, to man the borders. I doubt very much if you can have boots on ground to effectively man the borders. Yes. Same Chris Musa that you mentioned, I mean, he called for a coordinated crackdown on the use of local transportation systems by criminals, to move weapons, drugs, and other illicit materials across the borders. How do you make this more effective? And before we round up, we'd like to get your thoughts on U.S. delivery of weapons to Nigeria, Nigeria's critical military supplies. How impactful will this be?
Okay, let me start with the first part of your question, which has to do with movement of weapons. I'm aware that on the borders of Mexico, for example, we have equipment of a company called Rapiscan. They deploy what we call vehicle and cargo inspection systems. These systems are quite massive and big enough to scan containers, scan vehicles to see people who are either using opportunities, either hiding under trucks to cross into America, because there's a kind of watertight arrangement that the American government have made along the border. So they resort to either using the vehicles, hiding inside vehicles, hiding inside pallets that are hidden inside containers to make sure that they are able to cross. So these are some of, but we, in the country here, perhaps we begin to see some maybe responses from government into ideas that are brought forward by people. So you see a situation, for instance, if you talk about another equipment we call the backscatter. The backscatter is another equipment, a typical one that are deployed within the airports. They scan the body, but then they cannot detect meters like weapons. Right. So you now see a situation where I think what we need to do here is to see how we press on government to see how they can acquire some of these equipment. The other thing I also see is that, especially for road networks in Nigeria they're just delivered in a form that perhaps there's no control. But you see in other countries where road networks are channeled in such a way that no matter how you come through one side or the other, there's a crossing point somewhere through which you must pass through. And if you have to pass through that place, then you'll be subjected to that inspection. So that also is still on the part of urban planning and other areas. Then let me take on the weapons. If you remember in the first term of President Trump, you recall that about 12 aircraft were approved. Perhaps
Super Tucanos.
To me, I saw a situation in which there was a kind of some good speed on the delivery of those aircraft, which because I know that in some cases you have to either plan for about 12 years or 10 years before some of these. So we enjoy some level of cooperation under his government to see that, and they were game changers when even up till now they are making some good deliverables as force multipliers in the area of defeating the terrorists. Now to the issue of weapons, I had spoken in other fora and I had mentioned that if a government of the US, for example, is speaking and they had to come out and speak against certain, you saw that perhaps they are actually coming to make some delivery of some payloads on some of these terrorists, which later came to pass on the ISWAP. And I said, this thing is not restricted to Nigeria because ISWAP is not just within Nigeria alone. Right. So you now see, after they left here, I think they went to either Syria or somewhere to attack ISWAP again. Yeah. So it's perhaps on the part of the way it was presented here, it was as if they are just coming to come and kill people here.
Okay. So you think this is a good
So this is
good
to
development?
me, I think it's a good measure.
We have to thank you very much. Major General Anthony Atolagbe is a former field commander, Joint Task Force Operation Safe Haven, and consultant with ECOWAS and the African Union. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, madam.